All right. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Perek Beis. We're going to be concluding Halacha Aleph, going through Halacha Beis and starting Halacha Gimel. In the Ois other editions, we are going to Daf Chaf. We left off on Daf Yutes Amid Beis, 2 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Firstly, we're going to begin with more on the story that the Gemara related, how Rabbi Yechanan initially was upset with his Talmud, Rabbi Lazar, until Rav Yaakov Bar Idi appeased him. So there's going to be another detail that we'll have to go through the story. We're going to learn the sugya of Kol Ha'omer Shmua Mishum Oimra, Sif Soifs of either Loich HaShois Bakevet or Roich HaShois Bakevet, as we will see. We're going to have some Agadata regarding David HaMelech. The Gemara is going to clarify the end, the second part of the first halacha, of the first mission of this Perek, Machlokes Rav Meir Rabbi Yehuda, when it comes to making a interruption, Bein HaPrakim, or Be'emtza, so you have the initiating, Mipnei HaKavod, Mipnei HaYira, then you have the responding, and Pashut, we're going to clarify the meaning of Shitas Rabbi Meir, and on Amid Beis, we're going to begin here with Halacha Beis, which will be the definition between Bein HaPrakim, and we're going to have in Halacha Gimel, the Mishnah will tell us an explanation as to why do we sequence the Shema the way we do it, Shema v'yahavta v'hoya, and then we go back to Parsha Shalach, right? Parsha Tzitzis. We're going to have a machlokes, which is amazing, whether we're supposed to don the tefillin prior to the saying the Shema, or as we will see, certain Amoraim held Shema, tefillin Shmoyne Esrei. Now, where would they put it on, and how would they be mafsik being geula l'tefillah? But that will be such a shita. And from that, we're going to start the sugya of tefillin. You have to have gufnaki. You also have to have the capacity of not being masiach das while you are wearing the tefillin, etc. So, Nachama, we left off on that, what we have in the Ois V'Hadar, that few Tes Amid Beis, 2 lines before the bottom of the Amid. It all began with the minig of Bavel that a Talmud would not greet his Rebbe. Certainly, that's the minig by Chasidei Chabad. We never, Shalom Aleichem Rebbe. We didn't do that. The Rebbe said, we responded. But Rabbi Lazar not only initially continued the minig of the Bavloim not to greet the Rebbe, but therefore he ran away from the Rebbe. In other words, when the Rebbe came out, when Rabbi Yechanan came out, he ran away because he found it to be disrespectful to be there and not to greet. That's the way he was appeased. And Rabbi Yechanan was also initially upset that why, when Rabbi Lazar repeated a Torah that he heard from him, did he not quote it b'shem oimrei? Now, guys, we know the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, which is something the Gemara will not discuss, and that is kol ha'omer davar b'shem oimrei mevi geula lo'olam. But Rabbi Yechanan's upset was he was upset. Not everyone was upset. So the Gemara is going to ask, did he need for him to have his name quoted? In other words, why was he initially upset that Rabbi Lazar did not mention his name? And again, you can't say that's because the Marsha says this. In Yevamos Tzadik Vav, that he was upset because Rabbi Lazar was not he was preventing Geula. If he would have felt that the reason that he's preventing Geula Ma'olam, everyone should have been upset. And it could be that everyone was upset. We want to know why was specifically Rabbi Yechanan upset. Was it for his honor? So answers the Gemara, hold on. It's not just Rabbi Yechanan. David wanted that whenever someone quoted the teaching of David HaMelech, he should be quoted by name. And that's the meaning of Kapitel Samach Aleph, where David HaMelech says that Agura be'aholcha ilam. He asked God, may I dwell in your tent forever. Now, in Bavli, the word oilam means in both worlds, in this world and in the next world. Obviously, that's not the way the Yerushalmi understood it. If not, the question would not make sense. The statement would not make sense. And Pinchas, in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, says or asks, based on the understanding that he was asking to live forever. What did he think that he can live forever? After the Chet Eitz Hadas, prior to some point, not be Yemais HaMashiach, Lashita Saramim, or Olam Kimonogenoy, at some time after Yemais HaMashiach, only then will we go back to this living forever. El Amar David, that Eska, he was asking from God, may I merit you, al Shemi, that when anyone is repeating a teaching from David HaMelech, they should quote my name when they're learning it the Beis HaKnesses or when they're learning it the Beis HaMedrash, the Beis HaKnesses. We don't learn, but it's all Zayin. In other words, don't ask why Rabbi Yechanan was upset. Rabbi Yechanan wanted his name to be quoted. You see that David HaMelech wanted his name to be quoted. So we shifted the kasha to David. Well, it doesn't answer the question. The question is, what were they arrogant? Was it for covet? Okay, what benefit would he receive? Or let me say better, he wanted to live forever. How would that allow him to live forever? And that's the word. So says the Gemara, Levi bar Nazira Amar, because kol ha'omer shmua mishem oimra, then the person who is being quoted title-wise, sif soisav, our girsa is roy chashois. All right, roy chashois means to move. There is another version that is loy chashois. Loy chashois is to whisper. The word imoi, some people have the word imoi, some people don't have the word imoi. We'll read it the way it says it here. Sif soisav roy chashois imoi bekeven. The originator of the Stoidas lives, move in the grave. And what's the reason? Meaning, what's the source? Pasuk and Shir Hashirim, and the pasuk reads. If you look in the Torah Oid Hasholim, v'chikeich kiyayim hatoiv. That's how the pasuk means. And the utterance of your palate is like good wine, choice wine. Hoylech ledoidelim meisharim. Then the pasuk concludes doivev sifsei yishenim. And we'll see soon that the wine is referring to the words of Torah, that it moves the lips of those who sleep. Who are those who sleep? Not those who are living. Sleeping is after 180. That's the sleep. And I remember the Rebbe speaking about it, not like those who have a problem with taking certain chazals literally. Doesn't mean that every chazal has to be taken literally. The Rebbe fabrenged about this, that mamish, that when you move your lips, the gashmi is that it makes a movement of air, and a movement of air in this side of the world affects the movement in the ganze olam has. In other words, in a certain this world. In other words, how is it shaykh that when a person physically decomposes, they have lips to move? I don't know. But the Rebbe, remember, in a Fabrengen setting, was taking this to be literally. He was speaking about how the Rebbe, the Friedrich Rebbe, is alive. And when we learn his Torah and we quote his name, that he continues to learn and he affects the whole world. And that concept of living forever, again, it's not about their covet. We have a mission. The mission is to make a diribet achtoin. The problem with the mission is that when we're not living, we cannot fulfill that mission. But when you are oimer, here the lashon is shmua mishem oimra, you give the oimra the capacity of continuing to make a diribet achtoin. They are changing the world. Gewaldig. So that's why Rabbi Yechanan was upset. And what's amazing is that he was appeased. How was he appeased? If you remember what we learned in the last year, was because since everyone knew that Rabbi Lazar is his Talmud, so it was as if he was quoted, and obviously it was as if enough for Rabbi Yechanan to feel that his lips will still move. Well, maybe Chaim Lo'im, or you're giving life to the ones who are no longer alive.
You continue someone's teaching as if they're alive.
Yeah, but he said Geula. Okay, very good. So here we go. Now,
Rabbi, are we just understanding this, that Rabbi Yechanan was upset because when he would die, if things were said in his name, then his lips wouldn't be moving?
That's right.
But he was alive at this time.
Once he was appeased, it comes out that every time Rabbi Lazar is giving over a teaching from Rabbi Yechanan, even though he didn't quote his name, his lips will move. Josh Gordon Nebuch, He has no peace. The ganze Torah learned the chitas with him. The ganze Welt. Okay, right. And his takel, yeah, Rab Chanina, Bar Papa, Rab Simon. Not Nebuch, that's the word. The Yechom Achayel Ol Choyel. No menucha. In a good way. Chad Omar. Why does the pasuk say v'chikech ki yayin hatoiv? So Torah is compared to wine. What type of wine? Kehadein d'shesei kunditoin. It's compared to someone who's drinking kunditoin wine. Kunditoin wine is wine that has in it spices and honey. So there's wine. Now you have to know there's so many different comparisons. Alpi Chasidus, right? Yayin shel Torah b'chal. Yayin refers to the pnimius HaTorah. So you have yayin is one level of Torah. You have the pill pepper. Pepper clears the pilpul. The honey is the agadata. So it's like either this wine that's flavored with kunditoin, honey and pepper. The charnot, like the achon, the other one. The other Amoida says, someone who drinks aged wine. Aged wine, the chayr is for sure. He makes the charayva, the raivan, or something very deep. That what? What's the point of these examples? That there are certain wines that you taste in your palate even after you consumed it. That's how good it is. That even though you already consumed it, so even though the person passed away, if someone is quoting their name, the tam of their Torah is in their mouth. So now that we mentioned David HaMelech, let's continue learning about David HaMelech. Says the Gemara that ein dor she'ein bo litzana. There's no generation that doesn't have cynical people. Now it's interesting how we're going from litzanim to paritzim. It's not the same thing, but one thing leads to the other. The person becomes a cynic. Everything is a joke. Everything is cynical. That leads them to become vulgar. What did they do? They would go to the window of David and they would tell him, David, Amos, Yibana Beis HaMikdash. Amos, I Beis Hashem Neilech. Now, you have to know that everyone knew that David wanted to build a Beis HaMikdash, and God told David HaMelech that Yodecha Damim Malu. No, since he was a warrior, God told him that only your son will build the Beis HaMikdash, and everyone knew that. So they used to tell him, when will the Beis HaMikdash be built? Which means, why don't you die already? And he says, you're right. I want to die for the temple to be built. And he would say that he knew that they're dating him on. Nevertheless, he agreed. So Machdi, that's the meaning of Tehillim, that he says, I rejoiced when they told me, let's go and build God's house, because I would give up my life for the Beis HaMikdash to be built. However, what did Hashem do to David HaMelech Simcha? You have different girsois that no. God told David HaMelech, I don't want for you to die. You know why? Because whatever I want from the Beis HaMikdash, I have that plus from you. Amar Rab Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu David. David, no, Yomim Leimani Moinelach. Ki Yimlu Yomecha. And we know that David HaMelech was given years from Adam. Adam gave up 70 years. Adam is not coming back until Tchias HaMeis. So what do you mean? If David HaMelech won't have full lives, there was 70 years he has to live. You're going to live the 70 years. And he added, let's go. After you'll pass away, your son David, Shlomo will build it. And what's the purpose of the Beis HaMikdash? This is Kashita San Rambam. That the ikar of the Beis HaMikdash is lahakar of korbanos. Loy lahakar by korbanos. Okay, so then God tells David, Chaviv olai mishpat u'tzedakah she'ato oiseh, that the type of mishpat and tzedakah that David uniquely did, even more than Shlomo, obviously, is more to me than all of the korbanos. Matam in Yerushalmi means, and what's the source? Asoy or pasuk and mishlei. You understand? Shlomo HaMelech was speaking about his father, that asoy tzedakah mishpat, that those who perform tzedakah and mishpat nifkar l'Hashem, that's choice. That's more acceptable to God. God chooses that more mi Zajac from bringing a carbon. They didn't have the base. They didn't have the base on Mikdash. In other words, Dove Blauner is making Rabbi Blauner saying good. He's saying, hold on, Karbanis we had prior. So I want to say it like this. First of all, that in this 57 years of Neuven given, It was not. It was called a Bama Gedoyla. I cannot call them Mizbeach, which means that they didn't bring all the korbanos. Oh, and even if they did, I think David HaMelech brought the Mizbeach. Okay. Piska, if we have the word Piska, that means that's how the Yerushalmi goes back to the Halacha Aleph, to the Mishnah. We call the Mishnah in Bavli. That it would Prakim Shalom B'Yakov. So guys, it's very, very simple. We already touched the Mishnah correctly because we learned the Bavli. That Beina Prakim Ba'emsa. What is Beina Prakim? We didn't define it. The question is, guys, are you allowed to make an interruption when you are in the middle of the Shema? David, you have B'nei Kol Adam, to anyone. One notch up is the people to whom you have to be machabed. We learned to machabed is an elderly person, a wealthy person. Yira, you have to have reverence to a rebbe, to your parent. Yira. These are the three madregas. So Rav Meir says that Bein HaPrakim, even though you're not in the middle, you're in between paragraphs, you can only initiate mepnei hakavod. And then he said umeshiv. When you read the Mishnah, you might think, since responding is lesser of an affront to God, you're not beginning a conversation. You're being a mensch. You might have understood Rav Meir to be saying that if you can initiate mepnei hakavod, then you can be meshiv to anyone. Maybe that's what he meant. He didn't say what he meant. So that's what Gemara is asking. When it says, so frankly, Gemara, is it, if you have with the parentheses, which would not make sense, but maybe that will be the only reason why you can be meshiv, or only equal, or l'chalada. So the Gemara answers, Nishma min Ada, I'll know the pshat of Rav Meir from the following. Now we will follow the girsa of the Charedim, and we're not going to read what you have over here, that we're going to have the Gemara's responding from Rabbi Yehuda, which fits. In other words, since Rabbi Yehuda argues with Rav Meir, Rabbi Yehuda's Ashita is very clear. He articulated his opinion. If you will think that Rav Meir will hold that you can be Meishiv v'chol Adam, then he would be saying the same thing as Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda will not argue with it. When Rabbi Yehuda says, V'prakim, the opinion quoted prior to Rabbi Yehuda, which is Rav Meir, and as we spoke out the Charedim, when we learned the Mishnah, that's called Zu the Ein Sarachleimer Zu. In other words, the Mishnah Rav Meir is saying you can be shoyel, not l'chalada. You cannot be meishav l'chalada. You can be shoyel when you have to be halachically, you have to be mechaber the person. And since you are allowed to initiate, for sure you can respond, but only b'pnei hakavod. It's Rabbi Yehuda that says, no, you can already respond to chalad. And the same thing in the second clause in the Mishnah. That if you are in the middle of a paragraph, or you can only initiate the greeting if you have to have yira from that person. Now, what's umeshiv? Umeshiv could mean also maybe umeshiv already b'pnei hakavod. Divided abeir. Ma umeshiv only b'pnei yira, or even b'pnei hakavod. So here again, the Gemara says, Nishma min Hada. The fact that Rabbi Yehuda says be'emsa, Shalom pnei Yira, Mishmei Hakavod, Hakad Maisa, the Ashita prior to Rabbi Yehuda, which is Rav Meir, for him to have a different opinion, he's more machmed. He holds that Yishalom pnei Yira, and you can only be Meishma pnei Yira. In other words, since Rav Meir says you can be shoyel, he's saying, and you for sure can respond, but only for the same reason. It doesn't become more liberal because you did not initiate the Shalom Aleichem. Now, let me ask you a question. Be'emsa, what does be'emsa mean? Inside a paragraph. What does inside a paragraph mean? I'll give you the two options. Between psukim, at least you are in between psukim, so when you're greeting someone, you're not mamish interrupting a verse. Or does be'emsa mean even inside a pasuk? That the Mishnah did not clarify. The Gemara is going to clarify. At kedoin be'emsa parsha. Does the rule also apply be'emsa hapasik? We want to know. So says the Gemara, Rav Yirmiyah. Let's go with the words merames. He taka differentiated. If let's say his teacher came, someone who you have to have yira for, and he told him to his Talmud, Shalom Aleichem. If he was be'emsa, but he would say Aleichem Shalom. He would respond. But if he was in the middle of a pasuk, he would not respond. He would only do something with his hands. He would be maramas. Pasuk with his hands, like hi, like this, hello, not to ignore. The whole mindset of Yashka was that when Yashka came at the third time to ask forgiveness of his teacher made a signal with his hand, but he made a signal like, wait, I'll talk to you when I finish, and he understood it to tell him, gave 5. He got upset. Rabbi Yoina Mishtoid. Rabbi Yoina didn't know. Rabbi Yoina held that just like you can verbalize Alechem Hashalom be'emtza, in between psukim, inside the pasuk also. And Abchuna Bar Yosef says, I'll tell you a proof or a remez for Rabbi Yoina. When it says V'dibarta bam, I know it's a stretch. Okay, so what? So the pshat V'dibarta bam means we speak the words of Torah. So he says V'dibarta bam is mikan sheyesh l'chol reshus l'daber. When can you speak? Whenever you could. Even bum. What does bum mean? Inside. Even inside a pasuk. The Panei Moshe 2 lines before the bottom of the Amid. That lichish it's tarich lahafsik. When? Well, only if you're shoyel, if you're being meshiv, Rabbi Yehuda. But whenever you are allowed, even inside, there is no difference between psukim and inside a pasuk. Now, moving on, again, in our edition, we're going to the Chaf Amid Beis. Now the Mishnah has to clarify what exactly is Bein HaPrakim. What's in between the paragraphs? Another thing, just to remind everyone, that the Mishnah puts together Birchai Shema and Shematz all together. We're putting it all together. So ve'elu hein Bein HaPrakim. So the first Bein HaPrakim, if we are including, which we are Birchai Kriya Shema, Bein Bracha Rishona L'Shniya. So in the morning, that means that after you say the words Baruch Atah Hashem Yitzra Ma'oros, before our Nusach Havasoil, after Abayched is Am Yisrael Bi'ahava, before Shema Yisrael. By night, same thing, between Ma'anav Aravim Havasoil. Right, between Baruch Atah Hashem, how does it end? The night, Bracha, Oyev, oh, yay, we need coffee. No, Oyev Amo Yisrael B'Yavo. No. Gewaldig.
Baruch Atah Hashem, Oy V'Amo Yisrael.
Oy V'Amo Yisrael. Yeah, not Ba'avo. Oy V'Amo Yisrael. The word Ba'avo was in my head for some reason. Thank you, Danny. Danny doesn't even understand what we're struggling with. Right. Then between the second bracha and Shema. Shema means Shema B'Yohavta. Then between Shema V'Hoyim Shemoyah. Then between Shemoyah and Vayomer. Now comes the machlokes in the Mishnah. One of Tanakama holds between Vayomer and how does the pasuk end in Shalach? Ani Hashem Elokecha. Hashem Elokecha. We already learned before in the Yerushalmi. Why do we add the word emes? Because there's a pasuk in Yo where it says Hashem Elokim emes. So once we say we say the word emes. So he holds same thing. That's also called Bein HaPrakim. However, Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. And here Rabbi Yehuda is machmer. And he says, listen, Bein Vayomer le'emes v'yatziv loy yafsik. You can be mafsik. You cannot be mafsik. It's more chamur. Now comes a kash. Let me ask you a question, guys. You can't be mafsik. But you are allowed to be mafsik the way you can be mafsik be'emtza? Or can you not be mafsik at all? In other words, the Mishnah is saying that Rabbi Yehuda holds that between Ani Hashem Elokecha, either to the words emes v'yatz or to the words emes v'emuna, that's not called Bein HaPrakim. But what is it? The Mishnah didn't say. So there's a machlokes in the Yerushalmi. So the Charedim bring Shitas Rashi, which is Shitas Arash. But let's go shiv. The Kosav Arash, even the Yoav Tama Mishum Ani Hashem Elokecha emes nira the Chomer me'em saperet. Not only is it not Bein HaPrakim, but it's even more chamur. So what happens if your Rebbe greets you? Say the words Ani Hashem Elokeichem emes v'yatziv, and then respond. The Rambam disagrees with that. The Rambam holds that all that Yehuda is saying is that between Elokeichem and emes v'yatziv, that's not called Bein HaPrakim, but it's called be'emsa. So you could be mafsik for your Rebbe. According to the Rosh, you can't even be mafsik between the word Elekechem and emes v'yatzer or emes v'emuna. And Amar Rabbi, let's go to the Gemara. Talmud Rabbi Yudah, because Tak in Shlach it says, "Ani Hashem Elekechem." But we had the pasuk in Yirmiyahu where it says, "Hashem Elokim emes." In other words, we are not allowed to be mafsik between the words Elokim and the word emes. They have to be completely united one with the other. Beautiful. Now, moving on now to what we call halacha gimel. Why did we organize Shema the way we did? Shema v'yahavta comes before v'hoim shemaya. Right, this is a famous Mishnah. Elo says that Rabbi Shua ben Karcha, Elo sheyekabel all of Malchus Shemaim Tchila, and only v'acharkach yekabel all of all mitzvahs. Now, even though we have the mention of mitzvahs in v'yahavta, we have it towards the end, before we get to Chassidus. But since it begins with the first 4 psukim, that was the Kabbalah of Malchus Shemaim. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and v'yahavta. Until the words Alav Avecha, that is something beyond the keeping of the mitzvahs, beyond Torah and beyond mitzvahs. In other words, you have to first be Mekabel, the commander-in-chief, before you're going to listen to his commandments. According to the way the Alter Rebbe explains the difference between Shema and V'hoyim Shemoya, Amayim and Lakutei Torah, it's even deeper, because people can ask, okay, is there no Kabbalah's all mitzvahs in V'yahavta? So let me say it like this, that there are 2 modes of
V'hoya
is mitzvahs.
Okay.
Like the question is that how can you say that the whole Shema V'yahavta is only Kabbalah's or Malchus Shemayim? Don't you have also the mention of mitzvahs that you do? V'shinamta, muksharta, muksafta. So the Alter Rebbe explains like this, it's a Gavaldic thing, that ideally, God gave us the capacity of being so inspired that the mitzvahs will be done b'derech mamela. In other words, the concept of Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shemayim isn't a verbal statement the way we're doing it in Golos. I accept it's an experience. When a Yid has the type of bittul, when a Yid has Yichud Ilah and he has Yichud Tatorah, the avoida happens automatically. When a person loves, when you love, what you do for your beloved is not avoida. The V'hoyim Shemoya, according to the Alter Rebbe, really begins Chora'av. In other words, the fact that we could not keep the mitzvahs. How is it even possible for us not to keep the mitzvahs? Because we lost our inspiration. Yiddishkeit of Golus. And that's why, that's again, we explained, why is it that in Parshas Shema V'yahavta, Torah is mentioned first, Vishinamtam Levanecha, and then Uksharta. Forget about mezuzah. Torah mitzvahs. In V'hoyim Shemoya, that's the whole kasha that Alter Rebbe is addressing. First you say Ukshartem, and then you say V'limadatem. Why do you change the order? Because Torah means inspired. It doesn't just mean understanding. It means to be mamash on if you're Makabel oil Malchus Shemayim, ideally it's a much higher madrega. It's a higher madrega. It's a Yiddishkeit that is joyful. If a person doesn't have any inspiration, then they have to force themselves to do what God wants. Very different than the simple pshat. Kabbalah Salach Shemaim is like just bittul. Kabbalah Salach Shemaim comes before Kabbalah Sal mitzvahs. Now, v'hoyim shemoy levayomer. What about that? So there goes, because the main reason why we say vayomer, what's the main part of vayomer? I know it also mentions Yitzias Mitzrayim. But the bulk of Vayomer in Parsha Shalach, which is way back, is about putting on tzitzis. When are we obligated to put on tzitzis? Only by day. Because Shehoyim Shemaya, Noyig B'Mayim B'Malayla. People say, what are you talking about? Tefillin is not B'Mayim B'Malayla. I know. But mitzvahs, it's about Kabbalah's oil mitzvahs. However, Vayomer, Ein Noyig Ala Vayoim, as the Charedim writes, because it says from that Chazal learn prat l'ksus layla. Okay, so that's the Mishnah. So the Mishnah goes through the seder of what is said first. Now says the Gemara, and now we're opening up a conversation which ultimately will lead us back to the Mishnah. And this is something that if you never heard, it's going to be wow. Rabbi b'shem Rabbi Yechanan. My tam omru adam loivish tefillin v'kodesh ma mispalo. Why do we say that when the seder of the morning is first put on tefillin, and only then say the Shema and daven? Now I know today seder is much longer, so we put on tefillin before we begin davening. Davening then was much shorter. Davening then was basically birchos kriya Shema Shemana Esrei. It began davening with Barachat Hashem Likam L'Chaylam Yisrael V'Arachosha. That was the morning davening. And before that, they put on tefillin. Why? Why didn't you daven and then put on tefillin? Now, davening and then putting on tefillin would not mean to put on tefillin after Shemana Esrei. That's not the question. The question is, do you put on tefillin first, or do you daven first? Now, let me give you an argument. What did we learn in the Mishnah? What comes first, Kabbalah Malchus Shamayim or Kabbalah Mitzvahs? So I can argue that putting on tefillin is actually doing the mitzvah. So be makabel malchus shamayim, which is say Shema first. Now you can't just say the Shema. You have to say Shema with its brachas. So say bircha Shema, say Shema, which begins with kabbalah. I'm accepting you, God, that you're my king. Now you told me to put on tefillin, and then I'll put on tefillin. But that's not the way Rabbi Yechanan did. But that's the question. The question is like matam. Why did Rabbi Yechanan say? Why did Rabbi Chia say? Anyway, Rabbi Yechanan, that a person first should put on tefillin. And only then read the Shema and then daven. Why? Why not first Shema and then tefillin? So he gives an answer. Kadeshi Kabul Olav. Now you have different nuschos. We're going to read the nusach of the Charedim to be makabel malchus shemayim tchila mishalei. For you to complete it, when you do Kabbalah Soil malchus shemayim, look inside the word the Charedim writes. Kidatran ba'avois. The what? The Maisa Iker. You know that what the Rebbe said, HaMaisa Hua Iker. Show me where that says. Well, yeah, it's not exactly these words. But you see over here, it was you who asked me. Someone had a daughter. You asked me, Vlad. Someone's daughter was writing an essay, and she asked me, where does it say the words HaMaisa Hua Iker? Those words you're not going to find. Now we found them in the Charedim. The Mishnah says, Loi HaMedrash Iker Ela Hamaisa. The word Hamaisa, the Medrash is not Iker. The word Iker is what it's not over there, not what it is over here. The Maisa Iker. And then he goes further. What do I mean by the Maisa Iker? That when the Charedim makes that stretch, that when God asked us whether we want, what did we say? Nasav and Ishma. Nasav and Ishma. So he's saying as much as Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shemayim comes before Kabbalah Sol Mitzvahs, do you know what comes before Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shemayim? Maisa. How great is that? That's a stretch. Vigdima Yisrael Nasa L'Nishma. And that was the Roz of the Malachim. The Malachim knew that, as it says, that this is the Tehillim Kuf Gimel is about the angels, that first they oisa the Varei. First, they do what God wants of them, and then they lishmaya, then they try to understand. So this is a Gavaldic insight. Now you chap. So Kabbalah Shamalcha Shamayim first. No, action first. I know. See, it's a stretch. Okay, very good. So don't forget the words. You have the Charedim stretched it. Let's not forget the beginning of the stretch. He knows when you're without the Charedim, it doesn't sound like this. It says the Gemara is saying the words that when you do Kabbalah, it should be wholesome. Notice, how are you Makabal Al Malchus Shemayim if you're not doing what God says? You can answer, what are you talking about? I'm being Makabal, and then I'm doing it. You missed it. You have to do it prior to Kabbalah Al Malchus Shemayim. And the Gemara says that the Rav holds, listen to this. According Rav Omar, you read the Shema, and then you put on your tefillin, and then you daven. The question is when. That's the big question. We don't do all it. When? So we just learned when are you going to make? When are you going to make a bracha? When are you going to do it? You're going to do it what in between Shema min Shema ubir choiseho. So Rav David is saying a gavaldic thing that if you remember when we were still tzaddikim and there's something called karbana, is that whole part of the siddur Like after, I don't know, after the morning blessings until Hoidu, or at least until Zelmo Kaiman, you have over there the Shema, it's going to work. Yeah, that's what David is saying. That we meaning, I don't know who the we is, the people that say everything that you're supposed to say. Yeah, then you can say the Shema. Thank you. Now, guys, we had this now each one will have a source. Each one will have something to hang their head on. So masnisa, which means a baraisa, there's so many ways of reading it. Either Rav Pliga Ilove or Pli Ilove. There is a baraisa that obviously contradicts Rav. Not only will we find a Mishnah that substantiates Rav, don't forget Rav Tano Palik if you need to. What's the baraisa? Here we go. A person is occupied with burying someone who passed away, and the Gion Shema, and the time of Shema came. Now, Hareza Pleidish Lavakam Tahara, Veloivish Tfilin, that's the Seder. Makam Tahara says the Haredim go away for Amos. Go away for Amos. Now we have another sugya we have in the Babali, and that is called that you're not allowed to do mitzvahs in the close proximity of someone who passed away because you're loyeg l'rush. You are mocking the rush, someone who's poor. Mesim are poor from mitzvahs. So don't, and that's not how you go into a Beis HaChaim, we covered it, tzitzis. But coming back away. So go away for Amos and look at the order. First, put on tefillin, read the Shema David. Okay, so before you're going to refute, first, you're not going to refute him. But the Gemara says, you're right, that Braisa doesn't go with Rav. Rav is pligi ilave, but there is a masnisa, Messiah Rav. And what's the Mishnah? Our Mishnah. Elo sha'odim yikabel machshaim tchila, v'achar kach yikabel all mitzvahs. Gavaldik. Now, it says that the Yerushalmi is brief. So the Charedim tells us that in Daf Yutalud based in the Bavli, the Gemara actually uses our Mishnah to ask that doesn't Rabbi Shua ben Levi say that you should be mekabel all mitzvahs? I'm reading inside the. When does Rabbi Shua ben Karcha say he's speaking when you're saying words, what word should be said first? The words of Kabbalah Somal Shamayim should come before the words of being Makabal the mitzvahs. But our Mishnah is not speaking about the actual performance of the mitzvahs. Okay, and that is not brought up over here. You have a Braisa, you have a Mishnah, you have a Machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rav. Now that we spoke about Tefillin, says the Gemara, now we're going to begin. There are two dinim of Tefillin. The din of Gufnaki. Guys, Gufnaki primarily means that a person has to be mindful not to vent air, not to have gas pass out of the body while one is wearing tefillin. Amar Rab Yanai, tefillin, tzrichen, gufnaki. Now, it used to be at some point that everyone would wear tefillin during the entire day. At some point, in the times when Talmud Yerushalmi was written, that was a practice that was kept by some people, not by all people. Why don't more people wear tefillin? No. Okay. Yeah. People used to wear tefillin the whole day. Look inside the Charedim, the first wide line under the Gemara. What's the Gemara asking? There were still some people that wore tefillin the whole time. But when they looked at them, they didn't give them, say, wow, he wears tefillin the whole day. He's a raya that this person says a chaver. They did not do that anymore. Because there came a point where people would wear tefillin the whole day to give the impression that they are holier than thou people. but it no longer was a sign of someone that has an extra meal of the Hasidus. Nowadays, it's very rare for people to wear tefillin the whole day, even though if you go to Yerushalmi and HaKodesh, you're starting to see it again. Okay. And what happened? That Bechad Barnash, the Afkid Gabi Chavre, there was a person that had something of value and he wanted to entrust it. So who did he give it? He went into the Beis HaMedrash and he saw the guy that was wearing tefillin the whole time. He said, if he's wearing tefillin the whole day, I'll trust him. Those religious people, Ganef. What happened? Ukfarbe. And then when he asked it back, the guy says, "Wait, I never saw you. You never gave anything to me." So Amalei, so the one who entrusted him told him, Loch Emnes. Don't think you tricked me. I never trusted you. I trusted your tefillin. Elo le'ilein de bereisha chemnes. Azavort. Point is, I thought you're an Adam kosher because you were tefillin the whole day. It's no longer a sign of piety. But let's go back to the halacha. The basic din of halacha is that you have to have gufnaki. We're beating up to something. And then there's another din in tefillin. And the other din of tefillin is while you're wearing it, you cannot have hesach hadas. You have to have your mind on your tefillin, which means that if a person is physically weak, it's harder to concentrate. It's like concentrating without coffee. It's hard. So therefore, Rabbi Yanai, whenever he got sick, it took his body 3 days to recuperate. And during those 3 days, he would not wear tefillin. Rabbi Yanai hoyoloivshim only achar chol yoshloish yomim. Why? Because what happens is when a person is ill, it takes your koyach out. For how long? Long COVID, 3 days. And what's the source that a choili stays in your body for 72 hours? That's the pshat of the pasuk that hasolech l'chol avoneichem hareif l'chol tachliyoich. In other words, when a person gets sick, he gets forgiven. Why does he get forgiveness? Because the illness affects him for 3 days. Because how do we know that's true? Because that's a fact. Very good. The raya from over there is not 3 and not 4, but the raya is from Rabbi Yanai. Okay, we'll stop over here. We're opening up the sugya to be continued.
Sure.
He would not put on because he was unable to have the correct,